Hi BreazeHome developers, my name is Elio Rosabal and the product owner and mentor for BreazeHome 4.0 is Dr. Masud Sayari. In this video, I will be explaining the process to implement authentication on our API, create a custom permission, disable cross-site request forgery checks, and customize the Django Rest Framework API. So what is the description for the story? As a BreazeHome user, I would like to have a user authentication so that my data is secure in api.breazehome.com. If you have the proper credentials, when trying to access the api.breazehome.com, you will get a service response 401 unauthorized. If you have the proper credentials, when trying to access api.breazehome.com, credentials will be validated and response 200 will be received. Regular users will not be allowed to change other users' data. Only super users we have access to change other users' data. So the problem here was that the API didn't have authentication implemented. This implied that any registered user or guest user had access to the API data and permission to add, update, and delete this data. The solution to this problem is to implement session authentication in the backend. So the first thing that we're going to do is add a folder here in user templates named Rest Framework, and then over there we're gonna create a template named api.html. Why do we do that? Okay, so if we go to Breeze URLs, then we are using a router, right? If we go to the default router and then browsable API renderer, that renderer is using as a template an api.html template, which is located in a folder called Rest Framework. If we want to override that template, we need to create a folder named Rest Framework and then create a template that has the same name as api.html. This folder is going to be created inside the templates folder, which is inside users. Now we are going to change the API template by adding login and logout buttons. So here, when we are logged in, so if the user is authenticated, we are gonna show the name of the user, and we are going to show the logout button. Now, if we are logged out, like there is no user logged in the system, then we are gonna display the login button. So this way that it is. So we have the login button, and then if the user logs in, we're gonna see the username, and then we're gonna see the logout button. Then we are going to create a template view for successful logout. So here is under Rest Framework folder, and then we are going to extend the API HTML so we can maintain the layout, and then we're gonna add this template to the URLs file here, so we can create an endpoint for this template, and then when we log out, let's log in, and then if we log out, we are redirected to that template, and it tells you that we have successfully logged out of the system. So next thing that we're gonna do is to create a custom permission for our authentication. We create a new file named permissions.py, and then here we are gonna extend base permission from Rest Framework. So if we go to our permission, we see that we have two properties or two method definitions: has permission and has object permission. Has permission means that you have permission to see all data, and has object permission means that you have permission to change that data, to see the data, and to also change it. So let's go back to our custom permission. So what we want, according to the requirements, is that regular users will not be allowed to change other users' data, and only super users will have access to change other users' data. So let's go back. And then if you are a user, you can see other people's data. So what you do is just allow permission to any user that is authenticated. Now, if you are a super user, you have object permission to change the data. So, and also if you are a regular user, you can see the data if you are trying to access the data with a save method. The save method is just a get, head, or option, any method that doesn't make any change to the API. Now we are going to disable cross-site request forgery checks. So let's create a middleware and then a class named disable CSRF, and then this is going to be a middleware that is going to allow us to maintain token authentication in the front end at the same time that we are using session authentication in the back end. Now we are going to change our settings so we can apply all the changes. So let's go to settings.py, and here the first thing that we need to do is to enable session authentication for the API. This will allow us to use session authentication at the same time that we are using token authentication. So we come to the default authentication classes, and then we add the session authentication, which is a kind of authentication from Rest Framework. Notice that token authentication is just on top of session authentication, so we are using both at the same time. So now that we have applied our new authentication class, we need to enable our custom permission class. Now this class is going to be used as the default permission class for every class in the whole API. So now we need to add the middleware that we created to disable CSRF. So we come here where we have middleware, and then we add the middleware that we just created, disable CSRF. So we can allow preservation of the token authentication. At this point, the API authentication is partially implemented. We still need to enhance the functionality of our login and logout buttons. To do this, we want to change the default behavior of the Django Rest Framework, which is to log the user out when he makes a post request to the logout endpoint with the user credentials. So we want to avoid this and log the user out when the user clicks on the logout button, and then redirect the user to the successful logout template. This is achieved by adding 3 settings to this file. Let's go to the settings. So it's here. So the first setting will be logout redirect URL. So here we are going to put the endpoint that the user is going to be redirected to when the user logs out. Then we have account logout on get, and we set it to true. So this will allow the user to log out on a get request to the logout endpoint. So now we don't need to post the user credentials in order for us to log out. Just by loading that endpoint, the logout endpoint, we are going to be logged out. And then redirect on logout, let's set it to true. And then once the user is logged out, then the user is redirected to that endpoint. So let's see how it works. Let's log in, right? And now let's log out. We logged out, and then we were redirected to that point. So let's go back to the code. And now we also want to make the user login experience smoother by adding another type of input form to the login page. For this, we want to add 2 more parser classes to our default parser classes. So form parser and multi-part parser. These 2 parsers will allow users to enter the credentials in an HTML form. In addition to this, we want to remove the user email from the login form, so the user can log in with their username and password only. So for this, we're going to go to user and then serializers. Then we will add a custom serializer that will extend from the login serializer from BreazeHome package and set the email property to none. So right now the session authentication is already implemented, but we need to take into consideration that any guest user that goes to BreazeHome.com, if that user wants to see the properties, he has to have access to see the properties. So for that, we need to go to real estate and then go to views and then set the permission classes of the class property view set to allow any. So for that specific class, we are going to allow any user to see all the data. Now let's see a demo of this authentication, how it works. So I'm in the home page, and then I'm gonna log in. Let's first log in with a username that is not a super user. So let's post, right? And then let's make sure that we're not a super user. Okay, that is false. Let's go to the home page. Now we see all the data when we are logging. So let's go to see any user. Let's see, for example, this other user, and then we can see the data, but we cannot change it. Now if we log out, right, log in again, let's change the user, post. So let's go to home page, let's go to any other user. Oh, by the way, this user is a super user, so we can change the data of any other user. Let's log out. Let's try to go to, and we don't see any data here. So this is the end of my video, and here's my contact information if you have any questions regarding the API authentication. And here is the information of our pro owner, mentor Dr. Masoud Sadyari, and his email address. Thank you.